Do you know what you'll do if a crisis hits your organization? I mean, crises, they come in all shapes and sizes. How will you react?
And when a crisis does hit, are you managing your reputation or are you managing the crisis itself? These are questions that are best asked now rather than in the middle of a crisis. So I'm Chris Cuban, CEO and founder of Chemistry PR and Multimedia.
And I'm George Sells, Director of Client Services and Content here at Chemistry. And this is The Lab, a Chemistry PR and Multimedia podcast.
So the worst time to plan for a crisis is when a crisis is actually happening.
That's not even a plan, that's just a reaction. And it's always interesting in a true crisis situation because you do have to have good reaction. I mean, some of it is the ability to just instinctively go in the right direction. But if you've had a conversation about how you're going to handle things, if you've got a plan in place covering some of the stuff that could happen, I mean, if you're with a construction company, for example, you need to have a plan on how you're going to respond if there's a construction accident, because the likelihood of that is, it's there. It's not like, it's not like you're planning for being struck by lightning. This is something that can happen. It's something
not only an accident, but what if ice shows up to your construction site? What do you do?
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of different issues, and I mean, there's a whole list of 20 or 30 things that could happen on a construction site, but we have handled crisis for many different clients across the board, whether it be helping law firms with clients or helping restaurants with closures or employee issues, or a lot of different clients in different situations. That really the best crisis scenarios are ones we never talk about, because you never want to be able to talk about the crisis that we help clients not have to go through or prepare for.
What Chris is trying to say is sometimes your best work as a PR agency is the story that you're able to help keep out of the news rather than the story that you handle in the news.
Absolutely.
But I would say let's talk first about what you can plan for. And again, you don't want to go crazy. I mean, you could sit here and think of 200 scenarios of things that could go wrong, and the 201st one is the one that's going to kill you. But there are certain things that you can plan for with your organization because you know that there is a greater likelihood that that's going to happen. So you should probably be thinking about your 4 or 5 most likely crisis scenarios and probably start working from there as far as what are you going to do. And there are a million questions to be asked here, but for starters, who's going to do the talking? Secondly, what is your messaging? We do a message mapping process here at Chemistry where it can be used in marketing, but it's also very effective in a crisis, knowing what your core message is and kind of the things that spin off. Basically, it's reputation management. What do you want people to know about your company? If you've got that ready and then applying that, and you could have sort of dummy emails written out even, or dummy press releases that sort of speak vaguely utilizing your message mapping to some of the crises that you might have. Again, if you're a construction company, it could be an immigration raid, it could be a construction accident, it could be a fatality. If you're a school system, it could be a student gets ill in a measles outbreak or something like that. It could be kid comes to school with a gun. That happens, unfortunately. There are a number of things. Everything has its more likely scenarios. Those are the things that you want to be planning for.
Well, and you mentioned the message mapping strategy session. We do that first with every client that we bring on board. And this is the fundamental first thing that is important for every organization, is to understand what your messaging is. Because if you're trying to figure this out in the middle of a crisis, that's the last place. You need to practice, and make sure that you have this down pat. You want to, in a crisis scenario, mess up, fess up, dress up. If you make a mistake, you're going to admit it. You can say what you're going to do differently next time. But if you're building a crisis plan, we ask our clients when we first bring them on board in our onboarding program, like, what is a question that you don't want to ask, or you don't want to have asked of your organization? What are the top 10 crises that you've gone through in the last 5 to 10 years? What are situations that you've had with your organization that we might need to plan for? And some of these organizations will shock you as to the experiences that they've had in the past that you would not even think of would have to happen or plan for. And they're really amazing that they understand that they've gone through this and that they need crisis planning, but they might not have spent the time in doing it. And that's what's really core to the fundamentals of having a great company is planning for these scenarios and understanding you have to have people trained and people chosen to be the response team specifically for a crisis.
And that what keeps you up at night question is vital also. You need to ask them, and if you're just trying to do something on your own, you need to ask yourself, what are the things that keep you up at night? Like, oh God, that could happen and I will die if it does, but I've got to be prepared for it. Those are the things that you need to have some ideas as far as what you're going to do. And again, it's really important just to know who's going to be doing the talking, even something like that. And also to know like who's going to have different jobs. And again, every place is different. I worked for a school system at one time. Our department was fairly small, but we had enough people that we were able to kind of assign to different things in a crisis situation. You need to be keeping an eye. One person needs to be keeping an eye on social media, what's being said out there in the public, news media as well, but social media is where things are going to go around quickly. So you need one person who's keeping an eye on that. You need somebody who's handling internal communications. If you've got something going on, like a violent incident or something like that, it is just as important that the people inside your organization feel up to date, feel like they know what's going on, feel safe, all those sorts of things. So you need to be you can't forget the internal comms. And then of course, if it's something that's high profile, there are the media inquiries and those sorts of things, and you've just got to be prepared to handle that.
Well, and having that plan in place prior to a crisis is important because when a crisis is ongoing or occurring, you might be, as the communication person, handling interaction with the police or the fire department or media or your internal people.
Or all of the above.
All of the above, which you have in the past as well. And all of that takes time. So understanding what your message is and how you're going to convey that is important. Understanding what your home base is, what your positive proof points are, what your number one priority is, the safety and concern of your employees and the surrounding community. Whatever it is you're going to say is important, and then knowing who you're going to say it to.
And that last part is where I was going to go with that, is the knowing your audiences. We all have more than one audience. You need to, well before this ever happens, prioritize who is most important. And it's going to be different. Sometimes it's going to be, like if you're at a school system, it's going to be your families, it's going to be your staff. Kind of a twofer there. Different organization might think it's the news media. Different organization might think it's something else. But you have to have that prioritized because you're going to have to make choices. At some point, you're going to have to prioritize somebody over somebody else, and it'll be something you'd rather not do, but there's no time and you're stuck. And so if you already have had a conversation about this is who comes first, this is who comes second, this is who comes third, then you don't have to waste time thinking. And that's the worst thing in a crisis situation, is wasting time trying to build the car while it's going 90 miles an hour down the interstate. You're trying to figure it out as you go. You waste a lot of valuable time when you're doing that. So always know who your audiences are, who you're going to prioritize.
Well, and it's important to understand how to respond to media as well, is that silence is deadly. You need to respond. You need to understand that media has a deadline, and you have to respect their deadline. They have a job to do, as do you, and that you have to respond in a way that doesn't make you look guilty. And so no comment is the cardinal sin of communications. You always have to get back to them. You always have to say, I don't know the answer, but I will get back to you, or provide them with a statement.
And people will give you grace if you say, I don't know. I mean, people can understand what a crisis situation is, reporters in particular, but even, even your internal audiences, people like that, people will give you some grace if you just look them in the eye and say, I am doing the very best I can right now to figure out what it is going that's going on here, what we're going to do about it. I don't have a lot of answers right now. So please bear with me. I'm going to get back to you as soon as I know more. But right now, I don't know enough. Because another mistake you can make, no comment is mistake number one. Mistake number two, though, is rushing out with information and then getting it wrong. Because, like in a
Or
violent
providing
situation,
wrong information.
yeah, that's what I said.
Yes.
You rush and you get it wrong because Fred said it was this. Okay, and you go with Fred. Well, it turns out Fred was in the bathroom and has no idea what was going on, and you find that out half an hour later. So you have to it's this kind of fine line. The old John Wooden line, basketball coach back in the 60s and 70s, he said he wanted his players to play quickly but not in a hurry. You have to act quickly, but you cannot hurry. You have to make certain that you're getting it right. And if you don't know the answer to the question, don't try to answer it. You can say, I don't know the answer to the question. People will give you some grace for that. You just have to keep getting back to them as you find out more.
So to that front, I think preparation doesn't prevent a crisis. It prevents a disaster. And in saying that is you need to be prepared. It doesn't make you sound rehearsed. It makes you sound professional, is knowing what you're going to say.
Yeah, or at least having a ballpark idea. It's the old, and if you watched our podcast much, you've heard me use this line before, but the old Mike Tyson line, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And a true crisis is like being punched in the face. And so you have to take the shock, try to avoid your knees buckling, and then move ahead with doing what it is you've got to do. And like you said, you want to give clarity. You want to make people feel safe or secure, depending on what the situation is. That's incredibly important. But I want to throw in one other thing that will always be a curveball in all of this. And I say this with full respect for all of our friends who have passed the bar over the years, but there will be situations where the lawyers will be in direct conflict with what is good crisis communication. Because the lawyers are going to look at you and say nothing, shut it down, lock it down, zip it. We want you to say nothing. And even when you're in that position, there are things you can say that you're speaking without speaking in a way. And I'm not encouraging being, deceitful in any way. I don't encourage that at all. In fact, I totally discourage that. But for example, if you've got something going on with one of your employees where if you give any detail at all about this employee, you're going to get your butt suit off down the road. That's where, you kind of have to say it's a personnel matter that, of course, our attorneys are telling us we can't talk about. That's basically what the law is. And we also have to take into account that if something like this was happening to you and all the facts weren't in yet, would it be really fair for us to start talking about it? You just said we can't comment on personnel matters, but you said it in such a way that demonstrates that you're being responsible in your handling of the situation. That goes to your credibility. That goes to moving forward in a situation like that.
And this is why it's sometimes important to maybe hire a firm like Chemistry PR and Multimedia, is that we can
Shameless plug.
Yes. But we can help organizations facilitate the messaging, the strategy, and the response to media if it's in a situation like this where it is a crisis.
And there's nothing like experience in situations like these. I mean, experience is the real deal when it comes to dealing with a true crisis situation. And I mean, I've got some experience that, quite frankly, I wish I didn't have, but it's there, and that's incredibly helpful. And if I can wrap with one last thing that we haven't touched on yet, particularly if your organization is one where a crisis is more likely, this needs to be part of your thought process when you're hiring people. Because if you've got the right people in the right seats who know their jobs, who do them well, you are far more likely to have as smooth as possible a ride in a crisis situation. You will find out very quickly who the weak links are in your organization when you are dealing with a crisis. So when you are sitting in that room doing the job interview, you should always be looking at that person you're talking to through the lens of how are they going to handle a crisis.
Have the right people in the right seats. Most
Amen.
important part of the administrative process.
Amen.
Well, thanks for joining us today on the Lab Podcast.
We appreciate you being with us. Please like us, follow us, do whatever it is you do on your favorite social media channels, and that'll allow us to keep doing this kind of content for you. And also, if you've got some ideas, let us know. Drop us a line and let us know what you'd like us to talk about, because as you can see, we like to talk. I'm George Sells.
I'm Chris Cuban. See you next time.